It's a topic we all like to speak about and we're all always interested in thinking about is but who actually is the worst Formula One driver in history? Now I've put down a couple of people on my list here. Now I honestly want to hear your opinions on this because I've made a couple of videos in the past about a similar subject and I'd honestly want to hear your opinions and what the difference is maybe you thought now as to maybe 3 or 4 years ago when maybe I made another similar video about this. So let me know. I'm going to go through my list of 5 people on here and then maybe you can introduce a couple of people in the comment section below. So first on my list is Yuji Ide, the Japanese Formula One driver that came into the Super Aguri team, and he was a rookie at the age of 31, which is quite unprecedented. Most people are now a rookie of Formula One at maybe, some people even are a rookie in Formula One at maybe 19 or 20, but most people are a rookie at Formula One in maybe 22, 23. But this guy was a rookie at Formula One at 31. Even I can't quite believe it. Yuji Ide never really found his footing in Formula One. After around half a season, Formula One and the FIA revoked his FIA super license. I think this is the only time this has ever happened, and this was because of an accident in the Imola race in 2006. And it's quite incredible that this is probably the only time this has ever happened. Someone has been so bad in Formula One, they've revoked his FIA super license, which of course you need to race in the sport. What do you think? Yuji Ide, is he the worst driver that's ever been in a Formula One car? Or was it a case of not having enough experience and then being thrown in at the deep end and just expecting something to happen? Now, I don't really remember watching Yuji Ide race. I mean, of course, he was only in Formula One for a very short time, but I never really watched every single Formula One race until 2007. So I kind of just missed the magnificent Yuji Ide days in 2006. But yeah, from what everyone has been saying and the clips I see, it's just like this guy probably should never have set foot in a Formula One car. And it's a shame that maybe it was just a mistake that happened. People thought, oh, we want something to happen in terms of an all-Japanese Formula One team. That's what I think Super Aguri were hoping to do, but it all just sort of fell through. Nothing really worked in that regard. Unfortunately, yeah, that was Yuji Ide, sort of last hurrah in Formula One. Of the revoking of the super license is probably the biggest slap in the face you could probably get in Formula One, and I think that's the only time it's ever happened. So he's the first person on my list. Do you think he's the worst? Let me know in the comment section below. So the next person on my list is a driver going by the name of Giovanna Amati. I wanted to make sure I got it right, that's why I was looking down there. I was just peering down to my notes on the right hand side. So she got into Formula One via the team missing out on their ideal driver, which left them hunting for a driver to replace the person they thought they were originally going to sign. This left Giovanna filling in, and she spun 6 times on her debut practice session. Unfortunately, qualifying didn't go much better for her. She was 9 seconds off the pace of the pole time, which was set by Nigel Mansell. Unfortunately, her F1 career was very short-lived. After just 3 races, she was booted from the team, and it was quite amazing that she lasted that long. People thought she wouldn't last until the end of her first race, but maybe they gave her a little bit of time just to try and see, is there a bit of talent here? But unfortunately, after 3 races, we saw this was never going to be going anywhere good, and unfortunately she was booted out after just 3 races in Formula One. And of course it's a shame. We want to get more female drivers into Formula One, but we want them through natural talent, not through anything else. And that's definitely what we're seeing over the last couple of years at least. There are so many talented female drivers coming through the ranks. Hopefully it'll be the case in the next couple of years we genuinely see a driver in Formula One, obviously a female driver in Formula One that's there on pure pace, not through anything else. So of course we have had female drivers in the past that are in Formula One through having a lot of talent, some not just having enough money to continue, but in maybe the last 20 years or so, we haven't really had a female Formula One driver that's been capable of competing. Of course, it's a massive shame because we want to have a grid where it's mixed up a little bit more, not just a 100% male-dominated sport. I think it's great that there's many more female mechanics and engineers and even team directors like Susie Wolff in Formula E, or team directors, I think. Someone that's managing the team. It's great that that's sort of becoming a thing over the last couple of years, and it's not just because gender equality, it's because they're genuinely very talented at their job, and that's fantastic. And I think that's the same sort of thing we want in Formula One. We want to see a female driver in a race seat because they're genuinely talented rather than anything else, because they got money or whatever. And I think that's probably what's going to happen in maybe the next 10-15 years. We are going to see a female driver in Formula 1. It's only a matter of time. Great things going on, obviously, with Susie Wolff's Dare to Be Different campaign, and maybe to an extent the W Series. We'll see what happens with all that. I'm wishing the W Series the best because I want to see a couple of female drivers be noticed from that and maybe brought into maybe Formula 2 or maybe GP3, Formula 3 for example. I want them to look at maybe the W Series and realise there's some really talented female drivers out there. But yeah, I don't know whether segregating it is the best way. Maybe it would have been better to sponsor or give money to female drivers who just can't afford it, or go into kart academies and find female drivers if that's the way you want to go about it. But I'm wishing the W Series the best of luck. I really want to see how it happens. I'm a big fan of just motorsport in general, so I just love seeing races and people, battling against each other. That's fantastic. So hopefully the W Series provides some of that, just provides some great racing at least. I'm sure it will. So we'll see what happens with that over the next couple of months, I'm sure, as the drivers get selected. But as for Giovanna Amati, she didn't really have the best of success in Formula 1, and that might have been just down to a lack of experience. So, the next person on my list is Canadian Alpes, and he's actually the only ever Formula 1 driver to be black flagged for driving too slowly. Now, that's quite an incredible statistic, and it's not really the fact that he was incompetent, because he had major success in local races in his home country, but unfortunately when it got to Formula 1, he really struggled to get it out of first gear. Not literally, but he really struggled to find that next step in his Formula 1 career. He just struggled from the outset. Nothing seemed to go right. And of course, if you're getting black flagged for going too slowly, you realise something major is wrong here. And it's just weird, because of course, if you have a lot of success in your hometown, you think that maybe you might have it for Formula 1, especially in, I think this was the 70s and the 80s, but maybe even the 60s, but at the same time, it doesn't translate from local success to major success. Of course, there is a bit of a big boundary between them. So it was a shame for Alpes. Of course, he was trying to take his success from his motherland and trying to take it worldwide, but unfortunately, it never happened for him. Now, I've never raced in a motorsport race. I will be soon. You'll see. I'll let you know on the channel soon. But I never have competed in a motorsport race as I'm recording this, and of course I don't know the pressures and the intensity of going around and just being in a race car in a race situation, but I imagine being black flagged, especially for driving too slowly, is probably one of the most humiliating things that could happen to you in any sort of racing car. So Alpes probably doesn't want that statistic of being the only ever F1 driver to be black flagged for driving too slowly, but it's one of those things. People will definitely remember at least Alpes now for that thing. It's one of those sort of things. Do you want to be remembered for maybe something bad, or just not remembered in any way whatsoever? Who knows? So next up on this list is Ricky Vaughn Opel, and he's the great-grandson of the founder of the Opel car company, and you might know that in the United Kingdom as Vauxhall. Opel, Vauxhall, same company. So he was the great-grandson of the original sort of founder of that company, but his success in Formula 1 was very limited. Ricky paid his way to get to Formula 1, and even though he stayed in Formula 1 for 2 seasons, he scored 0 points. And that was despite driving for the very competent Brabham team, who, let's be honest, in that era of Formula 1 were one of the better teams, and one of the teams, if you wanted to be successful in your Formula 1 career, you probably would have at least had conversations with Brabham to race for them, because they were a very good team. So the fact he raced for them, I think, for 1 season and scored no points is quite embarrassing. So unfortunately, Ricky Van Opel really is seen as one of the worst Formula 1 drivers in history, because he paid his way to get into the sport, and unfortunately when he got there he struggled immensely and scored no points, even in a car which was competitive. Now I guess we're sort of used to paid drivers in motorsport nowadays, but maybe back then they weren't used to it so much. They saw that money and were like, whoa, that's amazing, you must be a pretty decent driver as well. But of course in the modern day Formula 1, I think even teams in like GP3 and Formula 2 realise this guy's got a lot of money. His success in the junior categories hasn't been great. So we'll sort of second think about this before we sign him up. But back then, maybe it was just all good, too good to be true in a way, and I guess it was. Ricky didn't really have the talent to make it in Formula One, but the thing is, with all the people on this list, I guess we talked about Alpes, he's a great driver in there in some ways. Like, they can be very competitive, but just once they make the step to Formula One, sometimes it doesn't always happen. So I'm not saying in any way these drivers are bad, because let's be honest, if they went up against most of us in a go-kart or even a club car, they probably would beat us. But in Formula One terms, we're being critical here, and we've got to be critical. They weren't particularly great, any of the people on this list. So the last person on this list is Alex Yoong. Now, a lot of people see him as the first sort of initiator of the pay driver term in Formula One. Like we speak about already, Ricky Von Opel was a driver that paid his way into Formula One, but I guess it wasn't so normal back then, so people didn't really think of him as a pay driver. But Alex Yoong was maybe the guy that came into Formula One, and everyone realised he just has loads of money and doesn't have enough talent to be in Formula One. And now I looked through Alex Yoong's results. He had very limited success, is the best way to put it, in all the junior categories. I don't think I recall seeing a single podium in his British F3 campaigns. I think he did 3 seasons. I don't think I see a single podium in there. I could be wrong, but I don't think I did see a single podium in there. And I think if you're not even scoring podiums at British F3 level, which of course is still a very competitive series, but it's British F3, it's not Formula One, you should be nowhere near a Formula One driver. And unfortunately for some people, Alex Yoong did get the opportunity, and he did get to Formula One. So the way Alex Yoong got to Formula One was through major backing from his Malaysian companies. For example, Petronas were one of those companies that really supported Alex Yoong in his career. They really pushed him, and of course, as a Malaysian company, Petronas wanted a Malaysian driver in the sport, and they saw Alex Yoong as that driver. Alex Yoong's rise through the ranks was definitely funded by the Malaysian companies that really pushed him and wanted to see him in Formula One. Of course, we were seeing the rise of the Malaysian Grand Prix getting onto the calendar, and of course, I'm seeing companies, I guess, like Petronas, for example, wanting to see one of the Malaysian drivers, obviously where they're from, getting to the sport. And of course, they pushed a lot of money into his career, and unfortunately, in his 1.5 years in Formula One, he didn't score any points. He only finished 6 races, and unfortunately for Alex Yoong, his career was over quite soon. He did go on to do actually quite well in A1GP, which is a quite successful it's not really a junior category, but a series in single-seaters a few years ago that was actually quite competitive. And he did go on to have a little bit of success in that, and has actually had quite a bit of success in GT racing since. But he didn't really have any of that sort of talent with him when he was in Formula One. So maybe it was a little bit too early for Alex Yoong. Maybe he was just pushed by his sponsors to get into Formula One as quickly as possible. It didn't work out for him. In his 1.5 seasons, no success was definitely held. And this is quite a weird story, because Alex Yoong, if you look now at his GT results, for example, is quite a successful driver. He's genuinely a pretty talented GT driver, and he wasn't too bad in A1GP either. So maybe he was, as we've just said there, maybe he was just pushed way too early into the sport. Now, whether he ever really had the talent to compete in Formula One is obviously to be talked about, because GT driving and Formula driving are completely different things. And A1GP, for example, is completely different to Formula One. So it's questionable whether he ever really was quick enough for Formula One, but he's one of those guys that really was just pushed way too early by his sponsors and backers into a sport. And I'm sure he loved it. I'm sure he loved his time in Formula One, but it never really worked out for him. So let me know, guys. Do you think Alex Yoong was the worst driver in Formula One of all time? Is there anyone else? And I'm talking about race drivers, not test drivers, or because, a lot of people have tested Formula One cars that are not particularly great. Maybe people are get given opportunities because they put a substantial amount of money in. I think, is it Chanok Nasani? He was a guy that was obviously very successful in his own right, but he sort of definitely gave Minardi a lot of money to test their Formula One car, I think at 43 years of age, and it didn't go very well for him. But I don't class him as a Formula One driver, because it was blatant that he never really had any career in racing before that. That was just sort of an opportunity he wanted for himself. But I'm talking about drivers that having basically a whole career, and then they got to Formula One and weren't particularly good. Now, once again, I'm not having a go at these guys because they're probably much more talented than I'll ever be in motor racing, but I think it's always an interesting topic of discussion. So, thanks for watching, guys. Have a fantastic day. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Please leave a comment down below, like on the video if you enjoyed, and subscribe if you're new. It's been Giovanna Amati. Goodbye.